Hi, I'm Mike Cohen, and this is part three of the Oakland County Child Killer. Today, we're going to go over the fourth and final victim, Timothy King, um, and then talk about some suspects and how they're found later on. But I'll be going deeper into that into another episode. So, on a recap from February 1976 to March of 1977. Four kids were abducted and held and then found murdered in snowbanks or off to the side of the road. Um, so the first one was Mark Stebbins. February 15th, he went missing. He was found on February 19th to be strangled or asphyxiated, better term, and then signs of sexual abuse. The next one is Jill Robinson. Went missing on December 22nd, found December 26th, 1976. She was found on the side of the road with a shot to the face, but later there's a determination that she was also asphyxiated. And then a week to the day that she was recovered, Christine Mahalik went and disappeared on January 1977 and was found on January 21st, 1977. And then shortly after hers, there was the pickup of Greg Green. And actually, that was January 25th. And Chris Bush was picked up on the 28th. And during the Green interrogation, he told police that Chris Bush was responsible for the murder of Mark Stebbins. And when they got Chris Bush in, his interrogation was quite interesting and disturbing. And so now we're at the point where the question was that arose as I go in and look into things and listen to things, watch things, read things, if Greg Green was in prison or not. Like I said, it was the 70s, and it was all paperwork, no computers, so nothing could really be definitive if someone made a mistake on a piece of paper. So there are room for error. And Chris Bush was let go on bail through two past polygraphs. Greg Green apparently passed, and so did Chris Bush. So they're out now. Apparently, Greg Green will go with he was out, and Chris Bush is definitely out on bail. And now the fourth victim, Timothy King, goes missing. His story is his mother and father. His father was a lawyer, and he was going to get some will signed, and then he had his wife with him as a witness, and then they were going to go to dinner, and then his two brothers were out, and his sister, the last person to see him alive, was getting ready to leave, and he asked her to borrow some money to buy some candy at the store. And she said, I'll leave the door unlocked when you get back. Timmy never came back. That was on March 16th, 1977. And similar to Christine's missing abduction, they were right on it, like immediately as soon as they called in. They went looking for him, and someone said that they saw this tip about a blue gremlin, which ends up being the wrong car. People talk about that blue gremlin a lot. You'll hear a lot about it as you go digging, which is probably a big problem as to why it was the wrong car. So you're not looking for the right thing. Remember, we talked about a Lamaze, and then there was another car, but that's similar to that with the other three. And also, if you go in deeper, you'll hear about a Chevy Vega, which I heard, like, I'm not a car buff, but can look similar to a gremlin. So as time goes by, it's March 22nd, 1976, and Timothy King is found on the side of the road. It was Gill Road, and he is into a whole different county of Warren. So if you watch and you listen, I mean, they talk about, how these guys might have been geniuses or anything. The only thing that they really did that was smart was to get so many counties involved where information could be misheld, things could, not handled properly, or one guy might have said something and then it goes down, the tin can theory. It's not the same, and the story changes. So to have that many people, at one point there was about 300 people involved in this investigation, and it was like the world's not the world, the U.S.'s biggest task force built and funded. There was millions of dollars put into trying to solve these murders. So also during when they found Timothy King, he was found to be strangled or asphyxiated, better term for it, and there was signs of sexual abuse. You'll hear that these kids were placed or taken well care of. When you find and dig deeper into it, that was not necessarily the case. So they were not, they did not receive good treatment. During Timmy's abduction, the press was trying to like really, get on this, and they got his dad to go on the news and his mom, and they mentioned, hey, when you get home, we'll get you your favorite meal, Kentucky Fried Chicken. I don't know really what the point of that was. Maybe I'm not thinking that way, but when Timmy was found, it was in his report that he was fed fried chicken right before he died. So now at this point, by the end of Mihalik being abducted, there was a task force coming in, but now the task force is at full assault. Now they have 4 kids that were abducted, held for days, and found dead. During Timothy King's disappearance, there was like people that they had a composite sketch, and when you look at this composite sketch that they had, if you don't think of Greg Green when you see him, and like I said, those guys, their names come up all the time in this investigation, and you don't even find out that they are questioned at all or looked at as suspects until years later from a childhood friend of Timothy Green that leads a lead that some polygrapher said, because that's what he was. I don't want to do any name dropping, but says, hey, I questioned the guy who killed your friend. And and then he just said, he really couldn't say much more because of client privileges and stuff. So he just gave him one little piece. Both the attorney and the person are dead. But I'm going to go deeper into that into the next episode. That's where things are going to go, and I'm going to go into all the suspects and things that happened. So this is a picture of Timothy King, the 4th and final victim. He was 11 years old. And he was held in captivity for 6 days and then found on the side of the road, asphyxiated with signs of sexual abuse. And, at this point, you got to say, there's 4 missing kids, and, what's going on here? And so at the time, in 1977, the task force kept saying, we have no leads. We don't have any, well, they had leads, but we don't have any suspects. We have no clue what's going on. Now, here's the thing with I feel that Christine and Timmy's could have been completely avoided had they looked for the car that Jack Halflesh was talking about. He was one of the investigators, like this Lamaze or this, there was another car that looks like a Lamaze or the Vega. They were looking for the wrong car. And also, I heard that there was, when I rewatched the Hulu series, that there was someone who saw Christine get taken, and they said that wasn't really, I don't know, it just didn't seem to pan out that that's what he actually saw, because the clerk said there was nobody, they said they saw her get in a car with a guy who was, dressed as an officer. So, they say that. The clerk said there was no police there at the time, and that, so they don't really take his tip very seriously. Like I said, you'd have to watch that Hulu series, Children of the Snow. So Timothy King, the 4th and final victim, his family really digs in. and they start finding more stuff. Barry King never gave up his fight, and his sister Kathy is also still fighting the fight. But like I said, I think that if they had the right car, just jumping back in, that they had the right car, they might have been able to find Timmy. If they really took the clues from Jill Robinson's crime scene and really started looking deeper into that car with body damage and apparently a partial plate, I think Christine could have been found. But the thing is that at the time they weren't really linking any of them together. But later on we find out that there's links between Mark Stebbins and Timothy King. And, it's kind of just like, what are we doing? Like, and it's just like, it's such, the more you dig into this, you just see, it's like, I don't know if these cops were all rookies, but there are so many mistakes in autopsy reports. There's so many conflicting reports with police, the leads that are brought in that should have been taken seriously, that some police were saying, hey, maybe we should do this. No, we got to go this way. And, that's what I said. Having that many counties involved in this, it's just so many people are bouncing ideas around. I think that Timothy King was probably held at the same place as Christine. Like I said, each kid, I was going to tell you where I think they were held. That's the only one I think was at the same place. I think that Timothy King was also at that cabin in S Lake, but there was no real like carbon monoxide or anything involved in that. Like I said with Christine, there was a little bit found in her system. So maybe I'm wrong with that. So he might have also been at Greg Green's house in that hidden room that I'll also discuss too more when I go over these guys. But here's a scary thing. So I'm going to jump ahead to what I'll talk about later. So they got this guy, Greg, and I feel like I should say this now because it's important. So they pick up this guy literally 3 or 4 days after Christine Mihalik is found dead. And though it's a different charge, it's still a sexual misconduct charge on a minor. They got this guy, and he talks about stuff and then says, hey, I know who killed Mark Stebbins. It's this guy, Chris Bush. So then a couple days later, they get Chris Bush in there, and what he says in there, it's just like, if you can't figure out this is probably the guy, then you probably shouldn't be a detective, because they go to his house, they find a suitcase with ropes and photographs of children. He has a shotgun. I don't think that shotgun was the same shotgun as Jill, but still, he probably has more. And as they search deeper into this, and the funny thing is when he gets picked up, he goes, "Yeah, you guys can look around. I got nothing to hide. Ropes in a suitcase when you got 2 kids in a 4-kid abduction murder case that were tied up." Okay, that's, and then, there's all this, these photos of these children, child porn. You're, being charged with a bunch of criminal sexual misconduct on minors. So, you are a pedophile. You literally tell the police, yeah, I fantasize about, holding kids for days. Can't answer what you would do with them in the end. You sit there and you say, oh yeah, this is where I pick up kids, which are Ferndale, Berkeley, Royal Oak. You even mention that bowling alley near Christine. So it's, and the 7-Eleven. So it's you're not piecing this together. I don't know if this guy was just wanted to get caught and just didn't want to come out and say it, or if he was just stupid, or if it's due to arrogance to the fact of who his father was. So his father was the CFO of GM, and back in the 70s, GM really had Michigan thriving. So he's a very well-connected person with a lot of money. And that's how his bond gets posted. And if you go and dig deep and look into get files that you can see, or while you watch stuff or read stuff, they mention it, his bond is it goes from typed to scribbled to a lower amount written in by somebody. I mean, the fact that you can't 100% say whether Greg Green is in prison or out on bail just because someone didn't update a note card, so it's just like, what are we? It's so bad, and honestly, Timothy King could have been found if they just sat there and looked for the right car. And his brother, I believe Chris, even was pointing out, like, this isn't the car, because later that night he even said, hey, that gremlin is still parked there. And they end up finding out that gremlin belonged to somebody who was having an affair, cheating on their husband or wife. So, and they're still going for this gremlin. Like, this gremlin is where it's at. But you're, like, not looking for the right car, and you just got to think, like, I mean, at this time, they weren't really linking the murders. They're just like, oh, and I could see some of that, like, 2 of them are boys and 2 of them are girls. Well, at least go into the Stebbins case again and go through the facts and look what's going on. And even with, Christine, like, let's look at Jill's and see what's going on with hers, So, this massive task force. Now, there's other things, too, that get a little weird. So apparently on Mark Stebbins, there was, like, this blanket found that doesn't even get DNA tested until, I think, May of 1977. Like, at this point, like, why are you doing that? And there was, like, dirt and debris and, like, fibers, they think, because that blanket was not, they don't know if maybe a police officer, I don't know. I don't think a police officer dropped it on. But like I said, this case can get so confusing with all of the fuck-ups involved and all the miscommunication. It even confuses me when I'm listening or reading something, and it's just like, it just keeps going like this. But if you sit there and you really sit there and you put all of the pieces together, like, you take all of it and you really got to comb through, and I've been combing through for a few weeks, and you comb through, your answers to who it was literally are right in front of you. You just have to get somebody to come out and admit it. So, and at this point, there's really only 3 people that are alive that have some sort of involvement in this, maybe not the killings, but have information. And to the other thing, like, the Green family and the Bush family, they might know something, and I've heard that, like, they've come forward with a few things, not so much the Bush family, but the Green family, like, his brother, he's the one who was like, yo, this room, and talked about some shit that his brother, like, wrote a letter, and it's like, you piece it together, and the most fucked up part is, they may have had the Oakland County Child Killer in custody. Like, even some of the cops are like, yo, this is the guy. This is the guy. And a past polygraph and money gets him out on the street, and then shortly after, Timothy King's missing. That's going to be a little weird. And, I'm going to talk about all the shit that was going on, then, and then what they find out later, like, through Detective Corey Williams and the King family find, and it's horrific. And you just are like, I don't know. There are a few good cops that were on here, but I mean, most of them, they're all like, oh, in their defense, they're lucky if they get, like, had any real experience. These are traffic cops, 1 murder a year might happen. They had no clue what was going on and just mishandling stuff, and also, like, all these counties involved. But that's the one smart thing these guys did, because, like, when I look at Chris Bush, I'm like, this guy, can he even put the pieces together in one of those children's puzzles? And, like, you look at a picture of Greg Green and you're just like, social deviant. And, when you look at, like, Arch Sloan, he just looks like, a moron. I mean, actually, Ted Lamborghini seems, when you look at him, he might have been the most intelligent out of all of them. But, like, in some of my conclusions, I've come to the same conclusions that everybody else. Chris Bush and Greg Green definitely were a huge, huge contributor to everything going on. And so I'll go a little bit more into the Chris Bush right now, but then I'm going to go more into these guys later. But Chris Bush, he starts to get questioned heavily on the Timothy King murder and abduction. So he's really, they're on him pretty hard. And Greg Green is sentenced, I think, the end of March to life in prison for I don't know, like 50 counts or 15 counts of sexual misconduct with minors. And I think he goes away completely in June, I think it was, of 1977. So, like, you know, he's gone. He's out of the equation. And Chris Bush is being looked at, but no one knows he's being looked at this time. That's never released. That's never to the press. This is completely like this is between the task force and them. So, because it's odd, and here's something I'm going to leave this episode at. So, in November 20th, 1978, there's a call at the Bush family residence from the maid that she cannot get into the house. So she goes to a neighbor's house and calls Chris Bush's brother, Charlie. And she says, I can't get into the house. Now, this guy doesn't go, hey, let me come by. Maybe he's sleeping, no one's home. Let me try to get in. He immediately calls the police. Hey, so they come in and they get in the house and they find Chris Bush in his supposed suicide scene. And there's so many questions you'll learn about his suicide. In my theory, it was a hit. And somebody put a hit on him. And I might think it might be in the family. Just by how the brother reacted, he must have known. And they are an important family that don't really want, this, hey, our son is a fucking serial pedophile, child abductor, murderer. So, how do you end this case quick? Get rid of the source. We got Greg Green in life, not looking at parole. He's gone. Now we get rid of Chris Bush. So when that makes me think like Ted Lamborghini and Arch Sloan definitely had an involvement, but not as strong of an involvement as Chris Bush and Greg Green. So they go to his suicide, and he's, that's what they call it. But there's so many questionable things that if you decide to dig further in, you're like, okay, this is definitely not a suicide scene. And all of a sudden, a few weeks later, the task force says, we have no leads and no suspects. We're going to close this case. We ran out of money. You ran out of money. You're the largest task force ever built to date, with millions of dollars funded into this case, and you ran out of money. Close up shop. Yeah, because like I said, and a lot of people think, this case was closed years ago. Both of your main suspects, and probably the ones doing the killing and abductions, one's in prison for life and the other one is now dead. And it's odd that right after that, there are no more killings and there are no more abductions with children based around this whole type of scenario. And so, the answer is crystal clear there. So where I'm going to end this podcast is episode. I've been listening to so many podcasts and I can't. So I'm going to end this episode with in December of 1978, when the task force just shuts down and says, we have no leads. Sorry, we did our best. We ran out of money. And in the next episode, I'm going to go more into detail of Greg Green and Chris Bush and let you come to your conclusion, because the more I dig, I come to the same conclusion as the people that I've listened to their podcast and I've read their books and documents everything, that these were the two fucking guys. And like I said, I added in my theories, I really think Christine Mihalich could have been found if they followed leads from Jill. And I think that if they took care of things with Greg Green and Chris Bush at that time, Timmy King would still be here. And, so this is why it's such a clusterfuck. There are major fuck-ups on this task force. And it's just kind of like, you start digging more, and now you're going into more important people. And like I said, the only thing that I kind of don't really see is, I think that there were people on this island. You'll learn about Fox Island if you dig in. That it's connected. I think that there were people that might have been at that island, that maybe, because it is confirmed that Chris Bush was on that island. And so yeah, that's like the connection, but I don't think it's as strongly connected as some people say. Maybe it was. I just didn't come to that conclusion because the guy who ran it, he took off to like Europe, and then there's another guy in They can't find him. He's somewhere in California, so that whole thing gets shut down. But that's a whole nother case, in my opinion. So again, thank you for sticking with me. I hope you stay tuned for the next episode when I go really into detail of Greg Green and Chris Bush and how fucked up they are. So, and maybe, like I said, you'll come to your conclusion that they literally had the killers and let them go. And maybe that's why this case is solved, but still cold and open.